Hi, I'm Bruce Logue, and this is Face2Face. I'd like to welcome you. We're on location in Bob Hart Square, and my guest is Monika Modest. Monika, I'm thrilled that we could have this conversation. My pleasure, my pleasure. Some of our listeners are going to wonder where your lovely accent's from, so would you give us just a little bit of background there?
Yes, I grew up in Switzerland. I actually spent my first 22 years there. So I went to school and was actually supposed to continue my studies in Zurich for psychology and sociology, but I decided to come to the US just for the summer. And one of the things I had done which allowed me to travel extensively was that I would volunteer initially in Switzerland and then all over Europe, doing some volunteer work that would either involve senior citizens or people with certain challenges. And so I kind of decided to do the same thing in the United States because that's how I was able to afford my traveling. So I ended up in Santa Monica in Los Angeles, volunteering at a school for young adults with different kinds of disabilities. And I was working as an assistant to the program director, primarily responsible for what you might want to consider art therapy related activities. And I enjoyed myself so much, I decided at the end of the summer that I didn't want to go back. So I stayed in Los Angeles, decided to go back to school, which was initially a problem since at that point I was actually an illegal alien. I did have a tourist visa which allowed me to come back several times. But it was very difficult to change my status, and at that point it was easy to just not worry about it. So I ended up going to school, and I was really inspired by, which doesn't seem like a big thing, I went to a Christmas kind of pottery sale, and I was just really intrigued with the work, because I had done some art before, but it wasn't really what I was spending that much time on. So I enrolled in some class at Los Angeles College and then transferred to Santa Monica and ended up transferring to Long Beach for my BFA and my MFA in design and sculpture with a minor in painting, printmaking, and actually also marine biology. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to stay in the US, because it allowed me to attend an institution that kind of met a lot of my needs or my interests, and not just exclusively art. And I also was working for Culver City Park and Rec, working at several parks, and was also responsible there for art programs. And so, especially being in a public area, being a public park, I started working on public art projects, which would usually invite the people in the neighborhood to become part of it, and be the ones creating.
Now, some of your skills and abilities open doors for you in that public park setting.
They really, yes. I mean, one of the things which might surprise some people, it really helped that I was athletic, because I was a lot of the parks that either it was all, colored people. I was a lot of times the only white person there. And especially the guys were very impressed by the fact that I was very good at paddle tennis, that I could run, that I was just athletic. And it made them respect me and be more open to some of the other things that I was offering. Art programs for adults and children, and they would end up bringing their families. And for me, that ended up being something that really, facilitated a lot of things. And I think another thing that made a tremendous difference is I was very lucky that I didn't really have any baggage when I came, in terms of having certain prejudice or just opinions about other people. And I think people really picked up on that it didn't matter to me who they were, what color they were, some of the other things that might make them different.
Right.
So that really, yeah.
Well, that's important. People want to be respected.
Right. And they really went both ways.
Yes.
People seemed to really respect me for who I was, what I could offer, and also how I would approach it and how I would feel about it.
Well, we're sitting in front of this wonderful tile project here in Bob Hart Square, and there are now approximately 3,000 people citywide, including this project and the G Street undercrossing, who regard you as a friend and someone that they trust and enjoy, they would say that they're glad that you didn't go back to Zurich, that you stayed here, because we get to enjoy the fruits of your work. Why such large projects?
Well, we just recently moved to Merced. After I lived in Los Angeles and I met my husband, he was a professor at USC, and then we had a daughter. I didn't think LA was necessarily the city to grow up in. Plus, East Coast is closer to my parents and my family. So we moved to State College, Penn State. Ended up staying there for almost 23 years. Didn't really need to stay that long, it just happened that way.
Right.
And actually moved to Merced 3 years ago. And I've been incredibly, not necessarily surprised, but we've tremendously enjoyed being here. One of the reasons why I love being here, I know lots of people say they love Merced, is really the people. And as you said, I've been extremely fortunate that even though we've only been here 3 years now, I've literally met over 3,000 people. And people here are amazing. I mean, the way they were taking me in, the way they opened up, the way they allowed me to, listen to their stories, is something that I never expected to this extent.
You had an experience in State College, your Mudworks.
Right. I had a school. You're right. I had a school there because I actually like being my own boss. So having my own school worked really well. I would offer art classes to pretty much any age. A lot of my clients were people who have some challenges, like Down syndrome. So what I did was a lot like art therapy, and it just made me realize, and I kind of probably knew that all along, what art can do for a person. It provides you with the ability to be creative, gives you the tools to tackle a lot of challenges in your life, because especially nowadays, being creative and being innovative is something that we need to be to manage. And also those people actually made me very humble. The resources they use to kind of, handle their challenges or conquer it, was just something that I was really impressed with. Also, they were extremely persistent and insistent how they went about doing art.
Monika, one of the things that I have appreciated about you is that to you, people are just people, and they all have, every one of us has something different that we have as a gift, or that we struggle with as a challenge, or whatever, and you just approach people in that level way, and that's a great door opener, isn't it?
I guess it's similar to what I said earlier, that I really came without baggage. And for some, I'm not quite sure where this is coming from. It probably has to do with the way I grew up too. My parents were very liberal, very open, really didn't judge other people unless the experience justified it. So here too, those projects have really allowed almost anybody in this town to participate. From the former, chancellor at UC Merced, to the mayor, to people at the D shelter who turned out to be amazing artists, to some of the people presently at the juvenile hall, to the Red Hat ladies, to people, the quilting club. I mean, it just didn't seem to matter where any of these people came from. I realize more and more that art is probably one of the biggest equalizers. It puts everybody at the same table. It doesn't matter which walk of life you're coming from. We all share very similar stories. We have very similar hopes and concerns. And as people would sit together at the table, people that really didn't know each other, conversations happen. Besides doing the tile, that seemed to surprise everybody. And really created an understanding and an appreciation for the other person's situation.
Well, speaking of surprise, what has surprised you about all these experiences that you've had?
I mean, one of the things that probably, and it has carried me through all those projects too, is the way people have so eagerly embraced this project. There is an unbelievable need and desire in this community to be able to positively and actively contribute to something that they can be proud of, and create a sense of pride, ownership, and that it's within their control to make a difference, and within their control to change the city for the better that they really call their home. And especially the way people embrace this project that usually don't get asked to participate because they might not be considered capable of doing so. Their engagement and their extent of commitment and what they've contributed to this project has been absolutely, has far surpassed what I ever expected. And then another thing, that's really exciting for me that I can create those opportunities. Almost everybody who's participated had some concerns initially saying, I'm not artistic, I have not painted for a long time, I have 2 left hands, I really don't have a story to tell. They all walked away being tickled with themselves, very surprised that they could actually create something that they didn't think possible.
Right.
Some of them were like peacocks, just really going, and especially a lot of dads who initially thought they could just drop off their children, because I usually wouldn't give them that choice. They had to stay.
Yes.
And so I would invite them to participate, and they were usually the ones that would stay the longest, and either call their wives to pick up the kids because the kids were done. It's just, and then just the way people came back to, and how they, especially with the G Street underpass, it opened up a lot of homes for me. For the Hispanic mural, for about 6 weeks, had a large group of people at my house every night. Initially, we would just get together glazed, and we started having dinner, because the idea was you got to eat first,
Yeah, right.
And then this one gentleman, Ruben Sanchez, he, knowing that I was Swiss, he figured chocolate and German chocolate cake would be what I would enjoy. So we would have dinner. Irma, who lives in Logue, would amazing cook. She would prepare a meal. We'd work. We'd have dessert. We'd work till midnight. And you'll see the result. It's unbelievable what those people have contributed. And it was really people from all different walks of life. Ruben works the flea markets. Some people are field workers. Other work at UC Merced. This one guy, Fabian Alberto, who actually was the son of a field worker also, just got admitted to UC Davis Medical School. He's come an incredibly long way. What he did was unbelievable too.
Cool. Well, you were obviously hospitable, having these midnight painting parties at your house, but it got extended to you as well, did it not?
I ended up being invited or being able to go to people's home that would have never been open otherwise. And I think it helped that I felt very comfortable about having them at my house, which was a lot of times very different from what they were used to. So they seemed to feel that I'd be perfectly fine in what they would probably consider a more humble home.
Right.
And that's, again, too, that I just don't have that kind of baggage for whatever reason. I don't want to take credit for it. That's just the way I am.
Right.
And I feel very fortunate that, and then in many ways, another thing too, when I first came to this country, I came with just a yellow backpack. That's all I had. I needed help at times, and people really extended, themselves and really helped me out. And I'm in a point in my life right now, I feel very fortunate.
You can kind of return the favor, can't you?
I can really return the favor.
Yes.
And I seem to have something now with those community public art projects that allows me to use what I'm best at. That I can really use my skills, because I used to work as a teacher. I'm an artist, and I think I do quite well with people. And it's really my way of giving back.
Right. I'd like to finish with a couple of stories,
okay.
and a couple of your favorite stories about people that painted tiles for you.
Well, one of the stories, I went to several of the charity sites. There is a senior citizen kind of centers where a senior citizen can come every morning, they get breakfast and they do some activity. One of the ladies there, and that's nothing I'd like to mention about this girl, the youngest one was 9 months old, the oldest one 89, and actually she's the one I'll be talking about now. She was literally shaking when she was first asking for this, because she was very worried about not being able to do it. And she ended up doing actually 2 tiles, and one of them is the image of a dove, and I had stencils for some people who needed that help, and stencils are a really good way to get started because it frees you in terms of the image. So she would tell me the story that her husband had passed away recently, and they had this pear tree in front of their house. And many evenings, because we have pleasant evenings here, they would sit there just, you know, remembering things, talking to each other. And there were always two doves on this pear tree. And they had been there as long as they could remember. And when her husband passed away, the doves left. And for her, that was actually very comforting, because in her mind, the doves were accompanying her husband to heaven. So still now, she says, you know, I look out there and I can still see the doves, but I know that my husband is not alone. And it was something just that for her was very, very important. Some other stories, especially when I did the childhood disease shelter, there's a lot of guys there who lost custody of their children and who really are trying to sort out their lives. And it was very important for them to create images that they thought one day their son or daughter they could take them there and they could point to them and say, you know, to some of them actually used the image of a child, or to some of the other things that they knew their children liked. And it was really their way trying to establish some connection or something that they could be proud of and that their son would be excited about sharing with them.
That's wonderful.
So, yeah, I mean, there's a story pretty much with everything.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. We're hoping that this turns into maybe some more projects about these tiles and the stories behind them.
I really would like to invite the city and to encourage the city to further support projects like this and to enable us to have projects like this and to really allow themselves to celebrate with the community, because as people would like to have this acknowledged. I mean, it's not so much about them, and that's maybe another thing about a project like this too, is it's a community project. Even though it's important that you did part of it, but you have all those tiles around you that support your tile. And that's usually the way I arrange them too, especially with kind of a random pattern like this, that the tiles around your tile will make your tile look the best.
Yes.
So I'll look at colors, I'll look at subjects. So knowing that you don't carry the weight by yourself was very important. It really took a lot of pressure off some of the people who were just really worried about my tile is not good enough. At least it's what they thought initially.
So everybody's in good company, aren't they?
Everybody is in very good company. And then maybe just one last thing. One of the tiles was actually my mom's. I took all the supplies to Switzerland when I visited her last summer. And she was a little hesitant at first too, not having done something like this in a long time. And she ended up doing an amazing tile, and it's pretty much the last thing she did, because she then passed away 5 days after. So for me, this has really a very special meaning. I do come back here quite often.
To see your mom's tile.
Like talking to her, and just knowing that because she had never been to the United States. She didn't travel that well. In her mind, she did a lot, and would write letters and show her images. It's, for me, very comforting to have her.
Yes, yes, that's neat. Any other projects on the burner?
Well, one of the things that we're really trying to move forward is the Downtown Beautification Project, which will again be kind of a platform for the community to be involved. It'll be creating planters and also what I would call vertical planters that will have a frame that lend themselves to introducing artwork. And that all should happen the latter part of the summer and in the fall. I'm actually taking a little break right now. I'll be traveling also, but I'll be back the end of June. And so I really encourage people to look out. There will be announcements that will inform them about those upcoming projects. Also, people are free to contact me by email.
That was one of my questions. Is there a way that you would like for people?
I mean, my email is Monika Modest, spelled M-O-N-I-K-A, and then Modest, I always tell people Modesto without the O, at gmail.com.
Very good.
Because since I travel a lot, that's how I can be reached all the time, and I find it a very effective way for me to communicate.
Okay, wonderful. I hope people will contact you. Monika, I want to thank you for joining me today. I've enjoyed hearing these stories. It inspires me every time I talk to you.
Well, thank you. I feel very fortunate that I was able to get involved like this and that the community responded the way it did.
Wonderful.
Yes. But
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
And I want to thank you for joining us today on Face to Face. Stay tuned for our next episode.